Mohammed, do you know this next word, intact? Intact.
No.
Okay. I the because I asked ChatGPT to make these examples, very quickly, and then I saw this one and I thought, "Oh, I'm going to pick this because it reminds me of Egypt." Intact means undamaged, unchanged. So, if you think about if you visit a museum in Egypt and you see all of the amazing ancient things, right? Is it sometimes amazing? Uh, have you visited any museums in Egypt?
Yes.
Hmm. And when you see something, sometimes do you see something in perfect condition? Maybe it's 3 or 4 thousand years old, and you say, "Oh wow, it looks new."
Yes. Tut, Tom, Tutankhamun, Tom is well preserved.
Very well preserved. Okay. So you can say it's intact.
Yes.
That means it's not damaged. It's in perfect condition. It hasn't changed in many thousands of years. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Can you read the example sentence?
The ancient painting was preserved, preserved, preserved intact in the museum.
What does that mean?
Uh, it it's like it has all its characteristics has been saved,
Hmm?
not damaged.
Yeah, it's like it's in perfect condition. It looks like new. Maybe not exactly new, but it's in very, very good condition. It's not damaged. It's unchanged. Is that
Yes,
pretty clear what that means?
yes.
Pachu, can you read the example sentence?
The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
Have you seen that word before? Intact?
Yes, yes,
Yes. Okay, so you're familiar with it. This sentence is pretty clear for you.
yes.
Okay. Can you read the first four words?
The ancient painting was
Okay. What is the second word?
the ancient.
Okay. Pachu, how are you today? What is your
I
answer?
am okay.
No, no, no. What is your normal answer when I ask you, how are you? What do you always say?
I'm fine.
No, you don't. You say great. You always say great.
Okay.
Remember that?
Yes.
That's the same.
Great.
Okay, we have the same sound here. Ancient, ancient. So you start with eh, but then you have to pull your tongue back, like you're making a y sound. A, ancient,
A an ancient. Ancient.
ancient. Okay, in those four words, which words would you say are very important?
The a- ancient.
Okay,
Ancient.
ancient,
Ancient.
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 I think maybe we could do painting as well. And again,
Yeah.
that's the same sound. That's the same sound that you're having difficulty with. Pain, pain, pain.
Pain. Pain.
Ancient painting,
Pain.
ancient painting.
The 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 ancient painting.
Okay, so, but the words the and was, they'll be very small. The ancient painting was.
The the ancient painting was
Mhm. The ancient painting was. Mohammed, can you say those four words together?
The ancient painting was
Okay. Now, can you read the next three words, Mohammed?
preserved intact in the museum.
Okay, just the next two words is fine. What are
preserved, intact.
okay? Uh-oh. I've gone blurry. I have to fix my camera now. Let me just fix this. It will take a moment. There we go. Okay. Which words do you think should stand out, should sound important in that phrase, preserved intact?
Intact.
Okay. I guess maybe we should be more generous with our accentuation. Maybe we could do both preserved and intact. If we did both of those, if we start with preserved, which which syllable should get the accent in preserved?
Preserved. The middle one.
The middle one or the middle one?
The middle one.
The middle one. Okay. And intact. Which syllable will get all of the sound? Intact.
Intact. I hear it like all have the same emphasis.
Okay, if you hear both of
Intact.
them, let's see. Let's try all three. First we'll do the first syllable. Intact. Now let's do the second syllable. Intact. Now let's do both of them. Intact. Which one sounds best? Intact.
The second one.
Yeah, the second syllable. Because if it were both of them, it would sound like this. Intact. That sounds you could do it like that if you're angry. So
Yes.
it's possible, but only if you're feeling very strong emotions. Intact. I want it intact. But normally it's intact.
Yes.
Can you say that word? Let's say preserved intact.
Preserved, intact.
Hmm. The ancient painting was preserved intact.
The ancient painting was preserved intact.
Pachu, can you say preserved intact?
Preserved intact.
Hmm. The ancient painting was preserved intact.
The ancient painting was preserved intact.
Okay. Pachu, what are the final three words in this sentence?
In the museum.
Okay. Now I'm going to say that final. Which word is most important in that phrase?
The museum.
Okay. I'm going to say that word for you, and I want you to think about which is the biggest syllable. Museum. 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 Which is
Mu.
mu? The other ones are not so big.
Yeah.
Museum. Museum.
Museum.
Mhm. You say it.
Museum.
Say it again.
Museum. Museum.
This is small. Museum.
The museum. Museum.
So then we have in the in the museum.
In the museum. In the museum.
The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
Okay, that's good. Uh, Mohammed, can you say that final phrase in the museum?
In the museum.
In the museum. Museum. Do you know what? I'm sorry. I've made a mistake. It's Z. Z is the sound. Museum. I don't know. See, this is why I can't do these at night. Museum. It's supposed
Museum.
Yeah, it's supposed to be museum. Pachu, can you say it again? The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
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 Okay. Mohammed, can you say that again?
The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
Okay, Mohammed, can you make a? Oh wait, let's do intonation. Uh, how many phrases can you divide this sentence into, Mohammed?
Two.
What are the two phrases?
It will first one will end at intact.
Okay. All right. Now, if we look at that first phrase, how would you like that to sound? Do you want it to sound nice and friendly or serious?
Friendly.
Friendly? Okay. So let's do it like this. That means that we have to put some high tones at the end, but of course we have to finish with a low tone because most phrases will finish with a low tone. Let's try this. Was preserved intact.
Was preserved intact.
And how will our phrase start? Will it start high or low?
In high tone.
Yeah, because most phrases in English will start with a high tone and then go down. But now we're going to make a spike with preserved intact, just to make it sound a little bit nicer. The ancient painting was preserved intact.
The ancient painting was preserved intact.
Mm-hmm. Pachu, can you say that phrase? The ancient painting was preserved intact.
The ancient painting was preserved intact.
Okay. Now, in the final phrase, in the museum, how would you like that to sound, Pachu? Would you like that to sound nice and friendly, or do you want it to sound serious?
Is happy?
Happy? Okay. So we'll put a high tone in there, but we have to finish with a low tone because most phrases end with a low tone.
Yeah.
How will our phrase start, Pachu?
In the museum. Museum.
In the museum. In the
In
museum.
the museum.
In the museum.
In the museum.
The ancient painting was preserved intact. In the museum.
The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
Okay. Mohammed, can you say in the museum?
In the museum.
Okay. The ancient painting was preserved intact. In the museum.
The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
All right. Mohammed, can you make a where ancient painting preserved intact question?
Where did the ancient painting wa- uh, was preserved?
What is in our?
So I will try again.
Go ahead. Uh-huh.
Where did the ancient painting is, stayed when we saw it in the museum?
What is the verb in this sentence? The ancient painting was preserved intact. What is the principal verb, or what is the verb that we need to work with? Not the principal verb, but what is the most important verb? If you're making a question or a negative, which verb is it important to consider here?
The problem is I want to convert the verb into noun, which is preserved.
Well, you know, the problem really is that you have a passive voice sentence. So here, let's make an active voice sentence for a minute. We have they preserved the painting. Okay. This is an active voice sentence. That means that the focus is on who is doing the action, which is preserve. Okay. So preserve is the verb. Do you agree? Is that does that make sense to you that preserve is the verb?
Yeah.
What is the so that's focusing on who is doing the action. But sometimes we don't really care about this part here. We don't care about who. So in this case, maybe we can make this passive. How will you make this sentence passive, Mohammed? Do you know how to do that?
The painting was preserved.
The painting
Preserved.
preserved. Okay. So now in our first sentence, what is the verb?
Preserved.
Preserved. Now in our second sentence, what is the verb?
Was.
Well, it's really two words. Okay, it's was preserved. It's two words. All right. But when you're thinking about making a question or when you're thinking about making a negative, because sometimes a verb can be very long, it can be several words long, which is confusing. But when you're thinking about making a question or when you're thinking about making a negative sentence, only the first word is important. You only have to think about the very first word. So, what is the first word in our verb?
Preserved.
That's the second word. What is the first word?
Was.
Okay. So, how do you make a question with the verb to be?
Was the painting preserved?
That's right. That's right. That's the question form. If you have the verb to be, this is how you make a question. Was the painting preserved? How would you make a where question? So that's the question form, the basic question form. Let's make a more interesting, complicated question. How would you make a where question?
Where was the painting preserved?
Where was the painting preserved? That's right. Where was the ancient well, let's see. Where was the let's do the whole thing. Where was the ancient painting preserved? We'll even say intact. Intact. Can you make that say that question? Where was the ancient painting preserved intact?
Where was the ancient painting preserved intact?
Okay, that's right. What is your most important word in that question?
Where?
Okay, where? So let's make it big. Where? Where?
Where?
How will you say where plus was plus the?
Where was the?
Where was the?
Where was the?
Okay. What about the word ancient and painting? Are those important words?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll pronounce it like this. Where was the ancient painting?
Where was the ancient painting?
Okay. And how about preserved intact? Are those important words also?
Intact
Okay.
is important. Yes.
Okay. In intact. So we make it big. We'll make that tact very big. Intact.
Intact.
Where was the ancient painting preserved intact?
Where was the ancient painting preserved intact?
Pachu, can you make that question?
Where was the ancient painting preserved intact?
So, but if the word where is important, then you should make it sound bigger. Where was the?
Where was the?
Where was the ancient painting preserved intact?
Where was the ancient painting preserved intact?
Okay, what is the answer, Pachu, to that question?
The ancient painting preserved intact in the museum.
Okay, museum. Museum.
In the museum. In
Museum.
the mu,
Make it longer. Museum.
in the museum. The museum.
So let's let's say that again, but remember that we have to make the special syllables extra long. The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
The ancient painting was preserved intact
Mm,
in the museum.
museum, not museum. I'm sorry, that was my fault. I made a mistake earlier.
In the museum.
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 Z is the big sound. Z is the big sound. Museum.
Mu- museum. Museum.
Hmm. Now,
Museum.
the word preserved, preserved. Where's the big
Yeah,
sound?
preserved.
Hmm.
Preserved.
Okay,
Preserved.
what about the er? Er, is that a sound that you eat down in your throat, or is that a sound that you push out? Er.
Yeah, it.
Right. Also v. Is that a sound that you push down in that you eat, or is that a sound that you push out of your mouth? V.
Uh, yeah, push down.
That's right. So what happens to if you have this situation?
Make strong.
Make it longer. Make it much longer.
Longer.
Preserved.
Preserved.
Yeah, because if you
Preserved.
preserved, I don't know, maybe people understand you, maybe not. I don't know. But if you say preserved, people will always understand you.
Yeah, so I think in my exam, one task is to repeat the sentence. So if I do in this way, then the algorithm recognize well and give marks. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to
Okay.
pay attention. That's important to do that. Preserved
Yeah.
intact.
Preserved
You have
intact.
to take your time. Don't be in a hurry. The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
Okay, that's good. Muhammad, where was the ancient painting preserved intact?
The ancient painting was preserved intact in the museum.
Okay, wonderful. All right, let's move on to our third vocabulary word, which is a phrasal verb. Mohammed, do you know this phrasal verb? This is a very common phrasal verb.